Welcome back to the Wasteland Survivors. Today, I'm sharing a confession that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Great War and the world that came after. We've all been told the same story that October 23rd, 2077 was the day humanity destroyed itself. But what if that story is completely backward? Let's talk about the pre-war truth we ignore. I'm going to tell you something that will make you hate me, something I've carried for 219 years. I knew the bombs were coming, and I let them fall. More than that, I understood why they had to. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what I was before October 23rd, 2077. I worked in a place that doesn't officially exist, doing analysis that was never supposed to see daylight. While America watched their pre-war sitcoms and drank their Nuka-Cola, I sat in a bunker reviewing casualty projections, not from the coming nuclear war, from what would happen if the war never came at all. Let me paint you a picture of the world you think you know. Everyone talks about the Great War like it interrupted something recoverable, like we were this functional society that just had one really bad day. That's the lie we tell ourselves to make sense of the wasteland. But I read the real reports. I saw the numbers that never made it to the evening news, and I'm here to tell you, the world didn't end on October 23rd. It had already ended years before. The bombs were just making it official. Start with the European Commonwealth. You know the story, right? They invaded the Middle East for oil in 2052. What you don't know is how completely that destroyed them. By 2060, when those oil fields finally ran dry, Europe wasn't just defeated, it had dissolved into warring nation-states fighting over scraps. The Commonwealth was gone, millions dead, entire countries reduced to pre-industrial conditions. And for what? Empty wells and radioactive sand. Tel Aviv got hit with a nuclear weapon in December 2053, the first since World War II. That should have been the warning. Instead, it was just the beginning. Then there's the Middle East itself. Everyone focuses on the Great War's destruction, but here's what the sanitized history books won't tell you. By 2054, the Middle East was already experiencing limited nuclear exchanges, multiple detonations, not the full-scale annihilation of October 2077, but enough to render vast territories permanently uninhabitable. The region that once powered the world's economy became a dead zone before most Americans even knew there was a problem. The resource wars, that's what they called it in my briefing documents. 25 years of continuous warfare from 2052 to 2077. Conservative estimates put the death toll at several hundred million globally. The European Commonwealth and Middle Eastern conflicts alone killed more people than the first two world wars combined, and that's not counting China and America's contribution to the body count. I remember the day I got clearance for the Alaska Front casualty reports. 11 years of fighting, 2066 to 2077. They'd send fresh recruits to Anchorage, farm boys who'd never seen combat. Most lasted less than 3 months before they were sent home in pieces, if they were sent home at all. The invasion of mainland China in 2074, military analysts called it a meat grinder, American soldiers bogging down in impossible supply lines, Chinese forces throwing wave after wave of troops into defensive positions. Neither side could win, neither side could stop. But you want to know what really convinced me the world was already over? The new plague, started in 2053, killed tens of thousands in the first outbreak, the socially transmitted death that turned people into hemorrhaging corpses in 3 to 5 days. And we never found a cure, not one that worked. The plague came back in 2062, then again in 2077, just months before the bombs fell. Each time, it killed and left survivors completely sterile, a disease that murdered your future even if it didn't murder you. The United States government's response? They developed the Pan-Immunity Virion Project in 2073, supposed to be a general defense against biological weapons. You know what that project actually became? The forced evolutionary virus, the thing that creates super mutants. Yeah, that abomination in the wasteland you run from? That's what humanity's best scientific minds produced when they tried to save us from plague. We were so desperate to survive that we built the monsters ourselves. And here's the part that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. The FEV research leaked to the world in February 2077, 8 months before the Great War. Protests erupted globally. People were terrified. But more than that, accusations started flying that the new plague had been engineered by the United States in the first place. I don't know if that was true. What I know is that by 2077, nobody trusted anybody. International cooperation had collapsed so completely that nations were accusing each other of biological genocide. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I'm about to tell you gets worse. The American home front, you've seen Sanctuary, those nice suburban houses, white picket fences, robot butlers. That's the propaganda image. That's what Vault-Tec wanted you to remember. What I saw in the classified assessments was different. Food riots across the nation in August 2077. Not isolated incidents, nationwide civil unrest. People were starving while fighting a war that had no end in sight. China invaded Alaska in 2066 because they were on the brink of total collapse. No access to fusion technology, resources exhausted. It was invade or die. America responded by annexing Canada, just absorbed an entire country and stripped it for parts. By 2077, Canadian protesters were being shot on sight. There are photographs in the archives, images that made their way to American households, causing more protests, more unrest, more martial law. We occupied our neighbor and executed their civilians for objecting. Taxes were at all-time highs to fund a war nobody could win. The military was deploying power armor units into China and still making zero progress. Liberty Prime, that super weapon everyone thought would save us, never worked. Billions of dollars poured into a robot that never took a single step. Meanwhile, veterans from China and Alaska were coming home to fight their own starving countrymen. Desertion rates were climbing. The command structure was disintegrating. In March 2077, the president and the enclave retreated to remote locations. Translation? The leadership abandoned the country to prepare for nuclear war. The oil rig in the Pacific, secret bunkers across America. While citizens were rioting for food, the people in charge were sealing themselves in their luxury survival pods. America was leaderless, starving, and at war with itself before a single bomb dropped. I worked in Strategic Assessment Division 6. We didn't plan for victory. We didn't strategize winning moves. Our job was modeling societal collapse trajectories, and every model, every simulation, every analysis came back with the same conclusion. Human civilization in its current form had approximately 15 to 30 years before complete systemic failure. The nuclear arsenal wasn't going to end the world. The world was already ending. The bombs would just be faster. You want the real numbers? The ones I'm not supposed to know? Global petroleum reserves were projected to be completely exhausted by 2085. Not expensive, not scarce, gone, and we never successfully transitioned to fusion power for civilian use. Every car, every factory, every supply chain still ran on oil. When it ran out, global trade ends. When trade ends, cities starve. When cities starve, governments fall. When governments fall, you get warlords and tribal warfare, medieval conditions within a single generation. The nuclear power plants scattered across America, they needed constant maintenance, trained personnel, spare parts, and supply chains. In a collapse scenario, every single reactor becomes a meltdown waiting to happen. The Environmental Contamination Office estimated that within 50 years of societal breakdown, radiation from failing reactors would render more territory uninhabitable than the actual nuclear war. The new plague wasn't going away, it was mutating. The outbreak patterns suggested it would eventually achieve pandemic status. No cure, no treatment that lasted, a disease that sterilizes survivors was going to spread globally. We were looking at human extinction through plague within 70 to 90 years if nothing changed. not might. Would. The models were clear. Agricultural collapse. The American food system was already failing in 2077. Dust storms, soil exhaustion, fertilizer shortages because fertilizer requires petroleum. The Great Plains were turning into desert. California's water situation was critical. We were feeding a population of hundreds of millions on an agricultural base that was disintegrating. The riots in 2077 weren't a temporary problem. They were the new normal. Here's what kept me awake in that bunker reviewing endless reports. We had identified 43 critical failure points in global civilization, infrastructure nodes that, if they failed, would cascade into total collapse. By 2077, 11 of those points had already failed. The European Commonwealth dissolution, Middle Eastern resource exhaustion, Chinese economic implosion, American political breakdown, new plague, food crisis, water crisis, energy crisis. The avalanche had started. You don't stop an avalanche, you just hope to survive it. I remember the meeting where we presented our findings to the Oversight Committee. 6 analysts with 200 combined years of experience. We laid out the math, showed the models, explained the inevitable trajectory, and the senior director, this man who'd served through 3 administrations, he asked one question, just one. If the bombs don't fall, what happens? We told him, slow starvation, plague, resource wars lasting decades, billions dying over the course of 40 to 60 years as civilization tears itself apart, survivors regressing to pre-industrial technology, knowledge lost, infrastructure crumbling, possibly human extinction if the plague mutates the wrong way or if enough nuclear plants melt down unsupervised. He sat there for a long time. Then he asked the question that haunts me, and if the bombs do fall? 2 hours, we told him, maybe 4. Global annihilation, billions dead immediately, nuclear winter, radiation, but also cauterization. The wound gets sealed instead of festering for decades. The plague dies with its hosts. The failing nuclear plants get destroyed before they can melt down naturally. The resource wars end because there's nothing left to fight over. And survivors start from zero, but they start clean. No inherited crisis, no cascading failure systems, just survival. He thanked us for the analysis, dismissed the meeting. I never saw him again. 3 weeks later, the enclave went into hiding. 4 months after that, October 23rd happened. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm not saying anyone pushed the button because of our report. I'm saying the people who built those bunkers, who created Vault Tech, who set up survival protocols, they knew, they all knew, the world was over. Either way, fast or slow, clean or infected, the Great War was just choosing which kind of ending we got. So yeah, I let it happen. I saw the projections. I understood the mathematics of extinction. And when October 23rd came, when I heard those air raid sirens at 9:47 in the morning, I didn't run. I sat in my bunker and watched the countdown. Watched the first strikes hit New York and Pennsylvania at 9:42. Watched the grid start failing at 9:47. Watched 200 years of American civilization disappear in 120 minutes. And you know what I felt? Relief. Because the alternative was worse. But here's where everyone gets the story completely wrong. You walk through the wasteland and you see the ruins, the radiation, the monsters, the raiders, and you think, look at what we lost. Look at this failure. Humanity destroyed itself and now we're scavengers picking through the corpse. That's the narrative everyone accepts. The Great War was the end of everything good. Except it wasn't. And I can prove it. Let me tell you about 200 years. That's the span from the bombs falling to where we are now. 2 centuries of humanity supposedly scraping by in a nuclear hellscape. 200 years that everyone treats as a dark age. A setback. A tragedy. You want to know what pre-war America accomplished in 200 years? From 1877 to 2077? They went from Reconstruction after the Civil War to nuclear apocalypse. In those 2 centuries, they built the largest military-industrial complex in human history, created weapons that could end all life on Earth, constructed a society so unstable that it collapsed into global warfare over oil, developed a plague with no cure, poisoned their own environment, created a government so corrupt that leadership abandoned the people to save themselves, and ended it all by pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. That's what 200 years of pre-war civilization accomplished. The Great War wasn't an aberration, it was the logical conclusion. Now let me tell you what the Wasteland accomplished in 200 years, the same span of time, starting from literally nothing. From nuclear fire and ash and billions of corpses, the new California Republic. You've heard of them, right? Big government out west. Everyone treats them like they're just playing dress up as old America. But stop and actually think about what they built. In 2189, just 112 years after the bombs fell, a small trading town called Shady Sands formed a trial council government. 4 other settlements joined them, and they voted the NCR into existence, a functional federal democracy, not inherited, not discovered in some vault, built from scratch by people who'd never seen a working government. 5 states, Los Angeles, Maxon, Hub, Dayglow, and Shady Sands herself, joined together voluntarily. They drafted a constitution, established rule of law, created an elected Congress that chooses the president and vice president for 5-year terms, set up a judicial branch to enforce their laws. By post-apocalyptic standards, the NCR became a paragon of economic success and ethical character, political enfranchisement, rule of law, physical security, a standard of living better than subsistence. These weren't theoretical. They were daily realities for over 700,000 citizens, 700,000 people living in a functional democracy 2 centuries after nuclear holocaust. Pre-war America never successfully spread democracy. The NCR did it in the ashes. They established a Department of State for foreign relations. They had embassies. They had healthcare for citizens. They had education systems. They had a professional military with over 70,000 soldiers. They built trade routes across multiple states. They controlled Hoover Dam and brought electricity and water to hundreds of thousands. They did all of this without inheriting a single functional institution. They built it from memory and determination and trial and error. Was it perfect? Hell no. They got imperialistic, overextended, made the same mistakes old America made. But think about what that means. In 200 years, they went from nuclear wasteland to a government powerful enough to make imperial mistakes. Pre-war America needed 200 years to go from the Civil War to the Great War. The NCR went from nothing to a functioning republic in the same span. They built faster than the old world ever did. And they're not alone. Diamond City, built in the ruins of Fenway Park in the Commonwealth, the largest settlement in the region, protected by massive walls, staffed by organized security forces. They established a functioning municipal government. They have a mayor. They have guards wearing repurposed baseball gear as armor. They have a newspaper, for crying out loud. Piper's public occurrences might be a scrappy operation, but it's a free press holding power accountable. When's the last time pre-war America had a press that actually challenged authority instead of parroting government propaganda? Diamond City has neighborhoods, market stalls, schools, a detective agency, a radio station, people living in individual homes, raising children, running businesses, all in the footprint of a baseball stadium. They took a monument to pre-war entertainment and turned it into a living city. No inherited infrastructure, no vault tech assistance, just people deciding they wanted safety and society and building it themselves. Rivet City. Even better example, 40 years before I'm talking to you, remnants of the Naval Research Institute found an abandoned aircraft carrier, cleared out the mirelurks, established a science outpost. By April 2239, a civilian settlement had grown around it. So, they formalized the city with a 3-person council representing scientists, civilians, and security. Rivet City became the largest settlement in the capital Wasteland. They established hydroponic farms producing non-irradiated food, set up a trading network with other communities, created a security force trained by veterans and equipped with combat armor and automatic weapons, built a research center that eventually reactivated Project Purity to provide clean water to the entire region. They voted down proposals to exploit their position for profit, kept their city open to traders and outsiders, fostered population growth through ethical governance. An aircraft carrier became a functioning city-state with scientific infrastructure, agricultural production, and representative government, all within 40 years. On a boat, in irradiated water, surrounded by super mutants and raiders, they did in 4 decades what pre-war civilization couldn't maintain for 4 minutes. Megaton, town built in a crater around an undetonated atomic bomb. Think about that. These people looked at a live nuclear weapon and said, "You know what? We're going to build our homes right here." With 28 named inhabitants and dozens more, it became the second most populated settlement in the capital Wasteland. They constructed walls from salvaged airplane parts, established a sheriff to maintain order, built houses, shops, a clinic, a bar, a church. Sheriff Lucas Sims ran that town with a handful of deputies and kept it safer than most pre-war American cities. Moriarty's saloon became a social hub. The Brass Lantern served food. Doc Church provided medical care. Moira Brown ran a general store and wrote the Wasteland Survival Guide, literally authoring new knowledge for future generations. They even had the Church of the Children of Adam peacefully coexisting with everyone else. Religious tolerance in a town built around a nuclear bomb. Pre-war America bombed the Middle East into radioactive dust over oil. Megaton achieved what the old world never could. Coexistence. The followers of the apocalypse. Here's where it gets really interesting. This organization formed in the Boneyard with one purpose: educate people about the horrors of the Great War, so humanity never repeats those mistakes. They're not a government. They're not a military. They're just people who decided knowledge and medicine shouldn't be hoarded. They provide free education to anyone willing to learn, free medical services to those in need. They research non-military technology. They opened the first post-war university, offering courses on a non-profit basis. They teach agriculture, medicine, literacy, history, science. No tuition, no profit motive. Just the belief that an educated population won't make the same mistakes. The followers set up camps in tribal territories and city slums, heal the sick, help addicts get clean, teach people to read, all without any centralized authority forcing them. No government funding once they split from the NCR. They survive on scavenging and donations and just keep going because they believe education and healthcare are human rights. Pre-war America hoarded knowledge behind patents and paywalls, put life-saving medicine behind insurance companies, built universities that required decades of debt. The followers said no, knowledge should be free, and they made it happen in the Wasteland. They created what the old world only pretended to value. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the Wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. Think about what I'm describing. These aren't isolated exceptions. This is the pattern across the entire Wasteland. Everywhere you look, people are building functioning societies from nothing. The capital Wasteland has multiple settlements trading with each other. The Mojave has New Vegas, the NCR, independent communities, all coexisting in complex relationships. The Commonwealth has dozens of settlements connected by trade routes. 200 years after total nuclear annihilation, humanity isn't just surviving. We're thriving in ways pre-war humanity never could. And we're doing it without all the things the old world claimed were necessary. no centralized mega government hoarding resources, no corporations manufacturing scarcity to drive profits, no nations sending millions to die over petroleum, no global economy designed to concentrate wealth in fewer and fewer hands. No surveillance state tracking every citizen, no propaganda networks telling people what to think. What the wasteland has instead is direct democracy at the settlement level. People voting on their own governance, communities trading based on mutual need rather than artificial market manipulation, security forces accountable to the people they protect, knowledge shared freely rather than locked behind intellectual property laws, resources distributed by necessity rather than quarterly profit targets. Is it perfect? Of course not. There are raiders, slavers, factions fighting for territory. But here's the thing, pre-war America had all of that too. They just called them different names. Corporations were raiders with legal paperwork. Wage labor was slavery with extra steps. The resource wars were faction conflicts over territory. The only difference is the wasteland is honest about it. When a raider gang attacks a caravan, everyone knows they're raiders. Pre-war, America did the same thing and called it economic sanctions, called it freedom, called it spreading democracy while dropping bombs on civilians. At least the wasteland doesn't pretend violence is something noble, and the wasteland is getting better. That's what everyone misses. The NCR is flawed, but it's only existed for 92 years as of 2081. Pre-war America, after 92 years of existence, still had slavery. The NCR banned discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and religious belief. They allow ghouls and super mutants to serve in their military. In less than a century, they achieved social progress that took pre-war civilization 200 years and a civil war. Diamond City built itself in living memory of people still alive. Rivet City went from empty carrier to functioning city in less than 50 years. Megaton has been continuously inhabited and improving its infrastructure year after year. The followers are spreading knowledge faster than the old world ever did because they're not gatekeeping it behind profit motives. The wasteland is succeeding, not despite the Great War, because of it. The bombs didn't destroy civilization's potential. They destroyed civilization's chains. All the systems that prevented people from building what they actually needed got vaporized on October 23rd. And once those systems were gone, people built better, faster, more ethically. The old world spent 200 years building toward extinction. The wasteland spent 200 years building away from it. That's not failure. That's success so profound that people can't recognize it because it doesn't look like what they expected. I know what you're thinking. You think I'm justifying mass murder, rationalizing billions of deaths, making excuses for the end of the world. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm telling you the truth that nobody wants to hear. The pre-war world wasn't murdered. It committed suicide slowly, and the Great War just accelerated what was already happening. Let me show you something else, something that proves my point even more. The stuff people don't talk about because it contradicts the comfortable narrative. Food production. In the pre-war world, agriculture was completely dependent on petroleum-based fertilizers, pesticides, and mechanized farming. When those systems collapsed, everyone predicted mass starvation. And yeah, people starved in the immediate aftermath. But 200 years later, what do we have? Settlements across the wasteland growing crops. Rivet City operates hydroponic farms producing fresh, non-irradiated vegetables. The NCR has agricultural communities spanning multiple states feeding 700,000 people. Brahmin ranching supports entire economies. People figured out crop rotation again, learned to work with irradiated soil, developed new cultivation techniques without petroleum dependence. Pre-war America in 2077 was experiencing food riots because their system was failing even with all that technology. The wasteland feeds itself with Brahmin-drawn plows and collected rainwater. They did more with less because they had to innovate instead of exploiting. Water. Project Purity in the capital Wasteland. Brotherhood of Steel and Rivet City, scientists reactivated a pre-war water purification facility and started producing clean water for the entire region. Aqua Pura distribution changed everything. Reduced radiation sickness, improved crop yields, extended lifespans, and they distribute it freely. No water bills, no corporate control, just clean water as a public good. The NCR controls Hoover Dam, providing electricity and water to hundreds of thousands without price gouging. New Vegas runs on that power. Settlements across the Mojave benefit. Compare that to pre-war America, where corporations controlled water rights and people died of thirst within sight of reservoirs they couldn't afford to access. Medicine. This one's important. The followers of the apocalypse aren't just teaching people to read. They're advancing medical knowledge. Dr. Usanagi, in the New Vegas Medical Clinic, performs implant surgery that enhances human capabilities. The followers research addiction treatment. They study radiation sickness. They develop new surgical techniques. In Rivet City, Dr. Preston and his team conduct genetic research. The capital Wasteland has multiple clinics providing medical care. Doc Church in Megaton, Dr. Barrows in Underworld. The followers' old Mormon fort in Freeside. Medical knowledge didn't die with the old world. It evolved, adapted, became accessible instead of locked behind insurance networks. Pre-war America had the best medical technology in history, and people still died of treatable conditions because they couldn't afford care. The Wasteland has doctors in settlements helping anyone who walks through their door. Not for profit, because healing people is what doctors should do. The bombs destroyed the healthcare industry, and actual healthcare got better. Education. Moira Brown's Wasteland Survival Guide. One woman in Megaton decided to document survival knowledge and distribute it freely. Her book became the definitive resource for wasteland survival. She didn't patent it, didn't charge licensing fees, just gave it away because she believed people deserved to survive. The followers teach literacy, science, agriculture, medicine, and history to anyone interested. The NCR established schools across their territory. Children in Diamond City learn to read and write. Scribes in the Brotherhood preserve technical knowledge. Knowledge is spreading horizontally across communities instead of being hoarded vertically by institutions. Compare that to pre-war America, where education required decades of debt, where schools taught obedience more than critical thinking, where literacy rates were declining despite having every technological advantage. The Wasteland achieved more educational success with chalk and salvaged books than the old world did with computers and standardized testing. Technology. Everyone assumes technology died with the bombs, but look around the Wasteland. People maintain and operate power armor, repair energy weapons, run hydroelectric facilities, build settlements with electricity and running water. The Brotherhood of Steel preserves and advances pre-war technology. The followers research peacetime applications. The NCR manufactures weapons and ammunition at scale. More importantly, technology is democratizing. Before the war, advanced technology was controlled by governments and corporations. Weapons development, medical research, energy production, all locked behind security clearances and profit margins. In the Wasteland, a scavenger can find a laser rifle and learn to maintain it. A settlement can wire itself for electricity using salvaged components and shared knowledge. Technology serves communities instead of controlling them. And here's something that will really mess with your head. Social progress. The thing everyone assumes died with civilization. The NCR bans discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and religious belief. Not in theory, in actual law that they enforce. Women serve in their military at every rank. Ghouls hold positions of authority. Super mutants can become citizens. Pre-war America in 2077, still had de facto segregation, still paid women less than men, still arrested people for their sexuality, still persecuted religious minorities. The NCR achieved in less than a century what the old world couldn't accomplish in 300 years of existence, and they did it while rebuilding from nuclear apocalypse. Megaton has the children of Adam worshipping radiation, living peacefully next to everyone else. Nobody's launching crusades, nobody's burning heretics. Diamond City has humans and ghouls coexisting. Not perfectly, but they're working on it. Rivet City debates citizenship rights through democratic votes instead of mob violence. The Wasteland is more socially progressive than pre-war America ever was. Not because they're morally superior, because they don't have the luxury of bigotry. Survival requires cooperation. You can't afford to reject someone's help because of their skin color or religion or mutation status when super mutants are attacking your walls. Necessity forced ethical evolution, trade networks, the Crimson Caravan, Fargo traders, the gun runners. These aren't megacorporations exploiting workers. They're merchant companies connecting settlements through trade, moving supplies from producers to consumers, creating economic interdependence that keeps communities cooperating. And they do it without stock markets, quarterly earnings reports, or manipulated scarcity. A caravan gets attacked by raiders, and settlements band together to protect the next one. Because everyone understands that trade benefits everyone. Pre-war economics was designed around competition and extraction. Wasteland economics emerged from cooperation and mutual survival. Guess which system actually serves human needs better? Currency itself evolved interestingly. Bottle caps became standard currency because they're impossible to counterfeit and their supply is naturally limited. No central bank manipulating interest rates, no government printing money to fund wars, just a stable medium of exchange that people trust because its value is transparent. The Wasteland accidentally created better monetary policy than the Federal Reserve ever did. Defense. Here's where people really misunderstand the Wasteland. Yeah, there are raiders and super mutants and death claws. It's dangerous. But compare the actual security situation to pre-war reality. Pre-war America was locked in an 11-year war in Alaska, invaded mainland China, occupied Canada and executed protesters, maintained a nuclear arsenal capable of ending all human life, spent trillions on weapons development, and still couldn't protect their own people from food riots and plague. That's what total security looked like: massive military spending, constant warfare, and ultimate failure. The Wasteland? Settlements maintain security forces proportional to their actual threats. Diamond City has guards watching the walls, Megaton has Sheriff Sims and a few deputies, Rivet City trains a professional security team, the NCR fields an army only as large as needed for their defensive perimeter. Nobody's building weapons of mass extinction, nobody's invading neighbors for resources because trade is easier than conquest. When threats emerge, communities cooperate. The capital Wasteland settlements work together against super mutant incursions. The Mojave communities coordinate responses to Legion attacks. People help each other because local security serves everyone. Compare that to pre-war military-industrial complex, where security was a profit center and threats were manufactured to justify budgets. Governance innovation. This is subtle but important. The Wasteland is trying different governmental systems and learning what works. The NCR is a federal republic. New Vegas Underhoused is an enlightened autocracy. Free economic zone. Diamond City is a mayoral system. Megaton has a sheriff-based law enforcement model. Rivet City uses a council system. Good Neighbor is practically anarchist. Different systems, different approaches, and communities can see what works elsewhere and adapt. That's evolution in action. Pre-war America was locked into one system that was clearly failing, but nobody could imagine alternatives because the system suppressed innovation. The Wasteland is a laboratory of governmental experimentation. Some fail, some succeed, but they're learning. Justice systems too. Megaton's sheriff model is transparent and accountable. Everyone knows Sheriff Sims. He's not hidden behind bureaucracy. If he's corrupt, everyone knows. If he's fair, everyone benefits. That's governance on a human scale. Compare that to pre-war justice, where police were militarized occupation forces and prisons were slave labor camps. The NCR is developing an actual justice system with courts and due process. It's imperfect, but they're building the rule of law from scratch, creating legal frameworks that serve communities instead of protecting power. When they make mistakes, they can see the consequences immediately and adjust. Pre-war, America kept making the same mistakes for centuries because the people making laws never faced consequences. Innovation in general. The Wasteland breeds innovation faster than the old world because necessity demands it. You can't rely on some corporation to solve your problems. If your settlement needs clean water, you figure it out. If raiders are attacking, you innovate defenses. If crops are failing, you experiment with new techniques. That pressure creates incredible ingenuity, jury-rigging repairs, improvised weapons, creative use of salvaged materials. The entirety of Megaton is innovation. They built a functioning town from airplane scraps and determination. Nobody had blueprints. They just solved problems as they emerged. Pre-war innovation was stifled by patents, regulations, corporate control, and military classification. Good ideas died in bureaucracy. The Wasteland has no such barriers. A good idea spreads because it works. Communities share successful techniques because everyone benefits from collective knowledge. That's faster innovation than any corporate research and development department ever achieved. Art and culture. People assume culture died with civilization, but walk through Diamond City. There's a radio station broadcasting music and news, the public occurrences newspaper, people gathering in the dugout inn to socialize. That's culture. It's different from pre-war culture, but it's alive. New Vegas has multiple casinos providing entertainment. The Tops, Gomorrah, the Ultra Lux. Not just gambling, but shows, music, social spaces. The Kings in Freeside built an entire identity around pre-war Elvis Presley, preserving and reinterpreting old culture into something new. That's cultural evolution. The NCR has its own emerging identity, the two-headed bear flag, the ranger aesthetic, their own holidays and traditions. They're not trying to recreate America. They're creating something new that honors what was worth preserving and discards what wasn't. That's healthier than pre-war culture that worshipped its own past while destroying its future. Even small things matter. People in settlements tell stories, share songs, create art from salvaged materials. The Wasteland didn't kill human creativity. It freed it from commercial constraints. Art exists because people want to create, not because corporations can monetize it. That's culture serving humanity instead of exploiting it. Personal freedom. This is the big one people miss. Yeah, the Wasteland is dangerous. You might get killed by raiders or rad scorpions, but you're also fundamentally free in ways pre-war citizens never were. No social security numbers, no surveillance state, no corporate tracking, no credit scores, no background checks. You want to travel from the capital Wasteland to the Mojave? Just go. Nobody's checking papers, nobody's demanding licenses, nobody's stopping you at borders. You want to start a business? Just do it. No permits, no regulations, no corporate monopolies blocking you. You want to build a house? Find materials and build. No zoning laws, no property taxes, no homeowners associations. Pre-war freedom was an illusion. You had the freedom to choose between approved options while everything about your life was tracked, regulated, and controlled. Wasteland freedom is real. It comes with real risks, but it's genuine autonomy. You can actually make meaningful choices about your life, and that freedom extends to communities. Settlements govern themselves. Nobody in California tells Megaton how to run their town. The NCR can't dictate to independent communities unless those communities choose to join. people vote with their feet. If a settlement's governance is bad, people leave and start something better elsewhere. That's accountability no pre-war government ever faced. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. So here's what I need you to understand. The reason I let the bombs fall, the reason I didn't warn anyone, the reason I've carried this for 219 years. The Great War was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. I can say that now. I couldn't have said it in 2077. Back then, I just knew the math, knew the projections, understood that we were choosing between two extinctions. But I didn't know what would come after. I didn't know that humanity would build something better from the ashes. See, the old world had a fatal flaw built into its foundation. It was designed to concentrate power, concentrate wealth, concentrate control. Every system, every institution, every structure was built to funnel resources upward and authority away from people. That wasn't a bug. That was the feature. The entire civilization was a pyramid scheme with human lives as currency. And that design made extinction inevitable, because when you concentrate power, you concentrate decision-making. And when critical decisions rest with a handful of people insulated from consequences, those decisions become catastrophic. The people who chose to invade Mexico for oil never faced food riots. The people who developed FIEV never risked plague infection. The people who built the nuclear arsenal never thought they'd burn in nuclear fire. The Great War destroyed that concentration, vaporized it. When those bombs fell, every centralized power structure disintegrated. Every corporation, every government, every military, every bank, every institution that had accumulated centuries of power and control just ceased to exist. And with them, died the system that made their existence possible. What rose from the ruins was fundamentally different. Because when you're building from nothing, you build what actually works. You don't have time for systems that serve abstract power. You need water, food, shelter, security. You build what provides those things. And it turns out, what provides those things is cooperation, not domination. The settlements scattered across the wasteland all discovered the same truth independently. Communities survive through mutual aid, through shared resources, through democratic decision-making where everyone's voice matters because everyone's survival depends on the group. You can't maintain an exploitate hierarchy when one bad decision kills everyone. Accountability becomes immediate and absolute. That's why the NCR works better than pre-war America ever did, because it grew from communities that learned cooperation before they learned government. Shady Sands wasn't imposed on anyone. People chose to join because joining made survival easier. The Constitution wasn't written by distant founders. It was drafted by people who'd lived without government and understood exactly what they needed from one. Every institution in the wasteland emerged from necessity rather than tradition. The followers exist because people wanted to share knowledge, not because some founder endowed a university, not because a government mandated education, just because communities recognized that educated people survive better. So they built education from that recognition. Trade networks exist because settlements need goods they can't produce. Not because some economists theorized about comparative advantage, not because corporations wanted new markets, just because the caravan bringing medicine to your settlement is worth protecting, so you protect it. Economics emerging from human need rather than abstract theory. Defense forces exist because threats are real, not because military contractors lobbied for budget increases, not because politicians wanted to project power, just because super mutants attack settlements. So settlements need guards, security emerging from actual security needs rather than manufactured fear. The wasteland is honest in a way the old world never was. When something works, it spreads because it works. When something fails, it dies because it fails. No propaganda to convince people that broken systems are actually fine. No corporate marketing to manufacture consent. No government lies to maintain legitimacy. Just survival sorting functional from dysfunctional. And that brutal honesty creates faster evolution. The NCR tried aggressive expansion and it's stretching them too thin. They're learning, adjusting in real time because the consequences are immediate. Pre-war, America maintained failed policies for decades because the people making decisions never faced consequences. The wasteland can't afford that luxury. Here's something else that nobody talks about. The technological level of the wasteland is probably optimal for human well-being, not too primitive, not too advanced, just enough technology to improve life without enabling systemic oppression. Pre-war civilization had incredible technology, fusion power, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, weapons that could annihilate continents, and they used all of it to build systems of control and destruction. The technology didn't serve human flourishing, it served power concentration. The wasteland has energy weapons, power armor, water purification, medical implants, and basic manufacturing. Enough technology to provide quality of life improvements, not enough to build surveillance states or weapons of mass destruction. The bombs destroyed the technologies of oppression and preserved the technologies of utility. Think about that. If the wasteland had pre-war manufacturing capacity, some faction would eventually build another nuclear arsenal. Given enough time and resources, humanity would recreate the same weapons that nearly destroyed us. But the wasteland doesn't have that capacity. Can't get it. The destruction was too complete, the knowledge too scattered, the resources too depleted, so humanity gets a second chance with training wheels. We can build functioning societies, we can advance technology carefully, but we can't rush to extinction again because the tools of extinction are simply unavailable. The Great War imposed a permanent limitation on humanity's destructive capacity. That's not a curse, that's salvation. Population dynamics too. 700,000 people in the NCR sounds small compared to pre-war hundreds of millions. But consider what those numbers mean. Pre-war Earth had too many humans consuming too many resources in unsustainable ways. Overpopulation wasn't just creating scarcity, it was making governance impossible. How do you maintain democracy with hundreds of millions of people? You can't. It becomes representative democracy, which becomes oligarchy, which becomes plutocracy. The scale makes direct accountability impossible. Leaders become abstract figures making decisions that affect millions of invisible people. The wasteland operates at human scale. 700,000 people in the NCR is large enough for specialization and trade, but small enough for actual governance. A settlement of 30 people can meet and vote on every decision. A town of 300 can know every leader personally. Even the NCR, the largest faction, remains comprehensible to its citizens. That scale enables the social progress I mentioned. It's easy to discriminate against abstract groups. It's hard to discriminate against Jimmy, your neighbor who happens to be a ghoul and helped you repair your fence last week. The wasteland's smaller populations force human connection. You can't dehumanize people you actually know, and the population is growing sustainably, not exploding like pre-war population booms that strained every system. Growing at a pace that allows infrastructure to develop alongside population increase. The NCR can expand into new territories because they're not desperately overpopulated. They're just growing naturally. That's healthy demographic expansion instead of the cancerous growth that killed the old world. Environmental recovery is happening too. Slowly. 200 years of natural healing. Radiation levels dropping. Plant life adapting. Animal species evolving into new ecological niches. Yeah, there are death claws and rad scorpions, but there's also evidence that ecosystems are stabilizing into new equilibriums. The oceans are recovering. Rivet City's location proves the Potomac can support complex life again. Lakes and rivers across the wasteland show signs of ecological restoration. Give it another 200 years and Earth might be genuinely habitable again in ways that were impossible when pre-war civilization was actively poisoning everything. Because here's the thing about environmental destruction. It requires industrial capacity. The wasteland simply cannot pollute at the scale necessary to cause permanent damage. No factories pumping chemicals into rivers, no industrial agriculture poisoning soil with petroleum fertilizers, no massive carbon emissions choking the atmosphere. The bombs destroyed humanity's ability to destroy Earth. So nature gets breathing room, time to adapt and recover. And humanity learns to live within environmental constraints instead of constantly exceeding them. Settlements that overexploit their local environment collapse. Settlements that maintain sustainable practices thrive. Natural selection favoring sustainability at the societal level. You're seeing it already. The NCR's agricultural communities practice crop rotation and careful land management because they have to. Rivet City's hydroponics are closed-loop systems by necessity. Water conservation isn't an environmental movement, it's survival. The wasteland is teaching humanity to live as part of ecosystems instead of dominating them. And this is where I come to my final point. The one that's haunted me for 2 centuries, the one that makes me certain I was right to let it happen. Humanity needed to fail completely to succeed ultimately. The old world was locked into patterns that were killing us, patterns reinforced by institutions, traditions, economic systems, power structures, cultural assumptions. Breaking free of those patterns while the civilization still existed was impossible. Too much inertia, too much invested interest in maintaining the status quo. Every attempt at reform got absorbed and neutralized by the very systems being reformed. People knew the resource wars were unsustainable. Didn't matter. The military-industrial complex kept the wars going. People knew the new plague needed urgent attention. Didn't matter. Profit motives directed research toward weapons instead of cures. People knew environmental collapse was coming. Didn't matter. Economic growth was sacred and nothing could stop it. The system was unfixable because the system was designed to prevent fixes. Every mechanism of change was controlled by those who benefited from preventing change. You can't vote out oligarchy when oligarchs control the elections. You can't regulate corporations when corporations own the regulators. You can't stop military spending when the military-industrial complex controls both political parties. The only way to break those patterns was to destroy them so completely that rebuilding them became impossible. And that's what the Great War did. It smashed every centralized power structure into radioactive dust, killed everyone who'd spent their lives serving those structures, obliterated the infrastructure that enabled their existence, scattered the survivors so widely that reorganizing into the old patterns became logistically impossible. And from that complete destruction, humans rebuilt instinctively along better patterns. Because when you're in a settlement of 30 people trying not to starve, you discover democracy fast. You learn that hoarding resources gets you killed. You realize that cooperation beats competition. You understand that everyone's survival depends on everyone's contribution. Those lessons scale up. 30-person settlements form into 300-person towns. Towns form into city-states. City-states form into federations. And at each level, the foundational pattern remains: mutual aid, democratic governance, distributed power. Because those patterns work for survival and domination, patterns don't. The NCR has problems because they're growing large enough that the old patterns start becoming possible again. Imperialism, corruption, bureaucracy. But they're also aware of those problems in ways pre-war America never was. They're having the conversations, debating the direction, making conscious choices about their society's evolution. That consciousness is the difference. Pre-war America sleepwalked into extinction because nobody could imagine alternatives. The wasteland chooses its path deliberately because everyone remembers what unconscious choices cost. The Great War burned the lesson into humanity's collective memory. Don't concentrate power. Don't exploit resources unsustainably. Don't build weapons of extinction. Don't dehumanize others. Those lessons stick because the consequences were absolute. You don't forget the nuclear fire that killed billions. You don't ignore the radiation still lingering 2 centuries later. You don't dismiss the broken world as ancient history when you're living in the ruins. The Great War created a permanent cultural memory that will shape human choices for millennia. So, yeah, I let the bombs fall. I saw the projections showing slow extinction versus fast cauterization, and I chose the option that gave humanity a future. I watched civilization end, and I felt relief because I understood what was being destroyed deserved destruction. The pre-war world was beautiful on the surface. Technological marvels, cultural achievements, centuries of accumulated knowledge, but underneath, it was rotten, built on exploitation, sustained by violence, driving relentlessly toward extinction. The beauty was a facade hiding inevitable collapse. The wasteland is ugly on the surface. Radiation, ruins, monsters, raiders, but underneath, it's healthy, built on cooperation, sustained by mutual aid, growing towards stability. The ugliness is temporary damage hiding permanent healing. 200 years isn't long in civilizational terms. We're still in the early stages of recovery, but the trajectory is clear. Humanity is building better, learning faster, evolving ethically. The wasteland isn't a post-apocalyptic nightmare. It's a pre-Renaissance opportunity, and that's why I'm making this confession now, because people need to know. The Great War wasn't the end of everything good. It was the end of everything that was killing us. The wasteland isn't a failure state we need to overcome by rebuilding the old world. It's a success state we need to nurture into something better than the old world ever was. Stop mourning pre-war civilization. It earned its destruction. Start celebrating wasteland civilization. It's earning its future. The bombs didn't destroy humanity's potential. They revealed it. We're finally becoming what we could have been all along if we hadn't been shackled to systems designed to prevent human flourishing. That's my confession. I let billions die, and I'd do it again, because those billions were dying anyway. At least this way, their deaths meant something. They cleared the ground for something better to grow. The nuclear fire was mercy. The wasteland is redemption, and the future belongs to the communities building it from the ashes of the old world's failure. I'm ready for whatever judgment comes. I've lived with this knowledge for 2 centuries. I'll carry it forever. But I needed you to understand the truth we ignore about the pre-war world and the wasteland. The bomb saved us by destroying what was killing us, and 200 years later, that salvation is blossoming into something beautiful. The Great War was the best thing that ever happened to humanity, and the wasteland is proving it every single day.